Good evening from Cebu, and welcome to On the Campaign Trail. It is 19 days to Election Day. Since November, in 21 episodes, we have consulted with over 50 experts, resource persons, campaign volunteers, and candidates to try and make sense of the 2022 elections. We consulted them in the belief that the democratic project is in danger and that it cannot be, elections as usual. Tonight, we return to two topics that may prove to be game changers, defining the outcome of the elections. In the first segment, we talk about campaign advertising spending with Jay Bautista, who studies the Philippine media landscape closer than anyone. And in the second segment, we talk about the latest Comelec decision on the Marcos disqualification cases and what this ruling, and in general, the Comelec's conduct, bodes for the election. We will, we will be joined by eminent lawyers Ted De and Emil Marañon III. In 2022, hashtag we decide. Without neglecting the other basic questions, on the campaign trail, we'll focus on how we decide and why we decide. I'm John Nery, and you are on the campaign trail. The advertising industry is no stranger to military metaphors, and in political campaigns, advertising is often referred to as the air war. It is campaigning that is done on the air, in TV and radio, and now on screen as well. It can have an outsized impact on a campaign, but overdependence on it has also doomed other campaigns. 2.5 months into the national campaign for president, who's spending where and how much? Jay Bautista of Kantar Media is the person to go to when you want to talk about the media landscape. He and his company have been keeping track of campaign spending on TV and on digital. Jay Bautista, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, John. Happy to be back. Good evening to your viewers.
Thank you. Jay, let me start. What exactly does Qatar Media monitor as far as the campaign is concerned?
Okay. Currently, we focus on two platforms. So the first is television, where the bulk of advertising still goes. So we focus on, in particular, on free-to-air channels and selected pay TV channels. So just a caveat: we do not monitor each and every channel that's aired in the Philippines. We focus on TV channels that have the most in terms of viewership and also the most in terms of advertising load. The second platform we focus on because it has uh, grown exponentially over the last 2 years, particularly due to the pandemic and changes in the local media landscape, is digital advertising. So we partner with a global operations group that provides us with 24 by 7 feed on the top sites in the Philippines. This includes video sites, display sites, and social media publishers. So we get all of the information in terms of what ads are being served online to various types of demographics. Unlike television, which is a one ad exposes to many viewers the same ad, online as we know, ads are individually served depending on your demographics, your interests, and your psychographics. So quite different methodologies are involved in terms of monitoring and tracking advertising. So also, we don't only monitor political ads, we monitor all advertising products, categories, and services on television and on digital. And then lastly, we also put a caveat that the amount of money that we usually quote are based on published rate cards,
That's right.
meaning we are not aware if there are discounts, negotiations, freebies involved in how the advertising contracts were finally agreed upon. So what we use is basically what the TV networks or websites, publishers provide as a general reference in terms of rates.
Thank you. How current is the data that you're monitoring? Are you dealing
Uh,
with same day or same week data?
Operationally, we actually almost cover it real time. So as we have this interview, we continuously have a data feed for television channels, especially online. But in terms of reporting, we usually have a at least a 24 to 48 hour lag before we can report it to our clients. That enables that the 2 day or 1 day lag allows us to edit, classify, and categorize the advertising content.
Can you speak of general patterns first that apply to both TV and digital?
Yeah. Okay. So what we've noticed, and I think this is a phenomenon that's been seen in past elections. There's now a strategy called or the use of what we now call uh, political advocacy advertising.
Mhm.
So, in layman's term, these are advertising done by politicians right before the official campaign period starts. So, in our case, for this election, the official campaign period started February 8th. All the advertising before that, but related to politicians who are trying to increase their name recall or introducing general ideas of their platforms without using the word vote for me,
Mhm.
are classified as political advocacies. And then we have the official tracking of political ads itself, starting from February 8th until May 7th.
And what are the patterns that you're seeing?
Okay. So interestingly, for the presidential race, one pattern was um, Lenny was leading the spending among all of the political the candidates prior to filing in October. But Marcos Jr. was not spending at all in terms of digital political advocacies. So um, on digital, we were seeing that the potential candidates, Isko, Ping, Lenny, were spending quite a lot starting the third quarter of last year. But Marcos Jr. was not active in terms of digital political advocacy advertising at that time. So that was a curious pattern because normally all the candidates would be trying to, as you said, maximizing the airwaves. No? On
Has that
television, yeah.
sorry has that pattern continued after the start of the election official campaign period?
Yes, he's still quite low in terms of ad spending on digital
Mhm.
as we speak. In contrast, um, so prior to the filing in October, it was actually Ping and Isco who were really spending a lot.
That's right.
Lenny was third.
Mhm.
When the campaign started, we saw Lenny through various groups. As you know, there's no the digital is still not covered by the Fair Elections Act, so it's basically still a free for all. So online, you see a lot of advocacy groups um, being identified as the advertisers for Lenny, and all of those ads identified with her were really growing as the weeks progressed.
Mhm.
So right now she's actually way ahead in terms of spending as an aggregate of all her contributors versus the other presidential candidates. And as you mentioned earlier, Marcos Jr. is still quite invisible from a traditional advertising perspective online. In
Very interesting.
contrast,
Mhm.
on television, um, it was Marcos Jr. is actually spending more than Lenny through the Partido Federal as the advertiser. So quite different strategies. And again, we also are aware that the Marcos Jr. camp has been focused mostly on their own Facebook pages, YouTube channels, as a platform for creating awareness about their candidacy.
I just want to be clear. When it comes to TV, the Marcos Jr. campaign is leading in ad spend
Yes,
after the start of the election or the campaign period.
that's
But
right.
before that, what was the situation like as far as TV advertising
Oh,
was concerned?
before that, it was a lot of it was the other candidates who were spending more
Mhm.
than Marcos Jr. or Lenny. Scott in particular, and Ping were airing a lot of political advocacies prior to the February 8th start of the official campaign period.
Is it possible to speak of which of the two periods, the pre-campaign and or the official campaign period, which is it possible to speak of one period that is more crucial to defining the outcome, or is I mean, how does that work?
Well, historically, the political advocacy phase or the pre official campaign period is critical for you in terms of survey rankings because
Mhm.
um, a lot of the surveys prior to the official filing of candidacy talks about name recall and awareness. So that's where the political advocacy surveys, advertising is, I think, important to make sure that um, the awareness of the potential candidate is increased, especially as the surveys are rolling out. Now, as we are in the official campaign period, I think the challenge or the need now is to raise or to go above the clutter because
Mhm.
a lot of activity is now happening across all the national positions available. So now it's critical for you to remain sort of present in the minds of the voters as election day nears.
See,
Also, especially,
can
yes,
we
John.
quantify these trends? Can we put some numbers to this? I know that you started with a caveat, right?
Yes, yes,
We're using the published rate card, so they might have enjoyed or they might be enjoying, discounts and all that. But
yeah.
given
Okay.
that, but
So, for example, for the period September
mhm,
2021 until February 7th, so this is the political advocacy period,
okay,
based on rate card published rate card estimates.
mhm,
um, Isco Moreno Domagoso was
mhm,
estimated to have spent about 900 million
okay,
pesos. Again, based on
mhm.
rate card, followed by closely by Lenny Robredo and Ping Lacson, who each were estimated to have spent about 800 million pesos each.
Is this combined or is this
So
just
separate,
for?
yeah. So ranking was Isco with 900 million,
Mhm,
Lenny with about 888 million, Ping with about 848 million, um, and then Marcos Jr. at around 620 million, and rounding off the top five was Manny Pacquiao with around an estimated spending of about 105 million, um, based on rate card. So that's from September to February 7th. So about
wait,
September,
is this
5 months.
combined TV and digital?
No, that's just for television.
Okay. Do we have comparable figures for the
For
unique?
online,
Mm-hmm.
The numbers are not as high
Mm-hmm.
because it's cheaper to advertise online these
Uh-huh.
days. So online, based on our estimates, Lenny spent about 93 million, Isco
Mm-hmm.
34, Ping about 30 million, and curiously, Marcos Jr. was only credited with about a million pesos, no,
Mm-hmm. Oh, this
for
is
the.
February 8 up to,
This is September
sorry,
um,
September.
2021 to February
Yeah.
7th. So
Okay.
the pre official campaign period. So
All right. And
where
then
you're allowed political advocacies.
how do the numbers look with the start of the official campaign period?
Okay, so from February 8th up to April 15th. So just
Mm-hmm.
before or just up to Holy Week
Uh-huh.
for television. And again, this is based on rate cards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, which we assume represents Marcos
Mm-hmm.
Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
has already spent about 658 million
All
pesos.
right.
So that's for a period of just less than 2 months compared to
Mhm.
prior,
Yeah.
um, where they spent um, close to 600 million for a period
20.
of 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then followed by Lenny, um, who spent about 540 million, again from the same period, February 8 to April
Okay.
15.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other candidates have dropped off in terms of
Mm-hmm.
spending. So Acción Democrático um, is only spending about um, how much is it? Sorry, let me just. Acción
That's all right.
Democrático is about 131 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that's ISCO.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't see
That's
Ping
all right.
in the list. Pacquiao only spent 34 million.
What about digital in the
For
2.5 months of the campaign?
digital, for the 2.5 months, um, Lenny is spending. Lenny's first in the ranking, followed
Mm-hmm.
by Isco and then Ping. So Lenny is spending about um, close to 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
Isco is about um, a third of that, sorry, half of that, and then Ping
Mm-hmm.
about a fourth. And then, as mentioned, curiously,
Mm-hmm.
we do not see traditional digital advertising activity as
From
much
Michael.
from Marcos Jr.
Uh, Jay, thank you very much for sharing these numbers with us. Can I ask you a couple of questions just to draw the implications?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Marcos. I mean, the fact that he spent only 1 million pesos more or less in the last, what, 8 months on digital, uh, is that explained by the fact that he has an entire architecture of an entire ecosystem of information or disinformation on digital? He doesn't need to run ads.
That is our assumption. He doesn't need to use traditional online advertising uh, for the traditional purposes of name recall and introducing platforms, etc. Because he has established way before, probably way before this election, the ecosystem that you mentioned. That's our theory as well. Again, looking at the survey numbers
Mhm.
and um, other available research which are showing that he's quite popular. The fact that he's not using digital and social media advertising tells us that he has another way of connecting to the voters.
My next question may not exactly be part of the scope of your work, but I want to ask it anyway. Um, it's the bang for the buck question, no? Which is more cost effective to run, digital ads in this day and age, or the TV ads, which have a greater
Okay.
impact and a more cost effective approach in the 2022 elections.
Um, I guess, well, I've also been asked this in some forums as well. It's actually not a choice between TV or digital.
Mhm.
Um, it's actually a complementary relationship between TV and digital today. Why do I say that? The demographics of the Philippines is still quite unique. 50% is still rural, which means TV is going to be effective in reaching
Mhm.
audiences, outside of the urban centers. So that's why it's important to still include television as
Mhm.
part of your uh, media mix or strategy. Digital is also important. Why? Because this is the first elections where more than 50% of the voters are below 39 years old, or are either millennials, Gen Z, and digital converts, or migrants, like the both of us. So, which means they're using their phones at least 4 6 hours a day, going online, which means that's also an ideal way to communicate with them. So, um, depending on the objectives of the campaign, I think it would be difficult to just choose one or the other platform. It's really important for these elections, at least, to use still both television and digital for um, different objectives.
I'm not surprised that Lenny Robredo's campaign is leading in the digital advertising spend. But I am surprised that they've spent over half a billion pesos, at least according to published rate card rates, in TV in the last 2.5 months. Did this strike you as surprising also, or what were the indications about the campaign as far as their
Well,
TV advertising was concerned?
if we look at the actual materials that they have been airing, I think it's a matter of their camp trying to counter disinformation, trying to put across critical messages that they feel the voters need to know, or are aware of, in order to make certain decisions moving forward. So I think they're spending very methodically and in a tactical way, because there are a lot of I think areas which they feel they need to counter um, on a massive scale.
Jay, I'm sorry, we're running long. Let me just ask one more question.
Sure.
Um, with 19 days left and only 18 days of campaigning, have all the potential advertising spots been already booked?
For well, the KBP has a limit of 18 minutes per program hour of advertising that you can air. So I'm sure that those minutes are getting um, eaten up. Traditionally, what we see every election period is a lot of the advertisers give way to the politicians because they don't want to compete with the noise or the
Mhm.
clutter. So yes, to the short answer is, yeah, the demand for spot is getting to be very high as we go into the last uh, 18, particularly the last week of elections. If you turn on the TV or monitor online, I'm sure you will notice the increase in activity.
GMA is not a member of the KBP anymore, right? So they can get
Yeah,
more
so
than
GMA has their own rules in terms of
yeah.
offhand they can probably uh, take in as much as until such point that the viewership will not suffer in terms of
Sorry,
the rate.
one last question. Can you compare ad spend in 2022 versus ad spend in 2016 or previous elections?
I don't have the figures right now, but um, offhand, I think it would be lower. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It would be lower on television because
But
a lot
higher.
of the other budgets are going to online and other activities because of the pandemic. So because there's a lot of difficulty in face-to-face campaigning, I think there's been a shift to um, online advertising compared to the last election.
Sorry. One more last question. Let's talk about ABS-CBN.
Oh,
Are they included in your monitoring?
yes, yes. They have a partnership with Channel 11. It's
I
called
see.
the
That's right.
channel is called A to Z, and they have pay TV channels like Kapamilya, Teleradio, ANC are still active. So yes, they are part of the monitoring and tracking. But the bulk of the advertising now, unlike before where it's sort of a 50-50 split between ABS and GMA,
Mhm.
right now, if you count spots probably and budgets, there's a skew towards GMA.
Jay Bautista of Kantar Media, thank you very much for your time, your work, and your insights. Maraming salamat, Jay.
You're welcome. Happy to be in your show again, John.
Thank you. Earlier today, the first division of the Commission on Elections released its resolution on the, if I'm not mistaken, fourth and last disqualification case filed against presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Or maybe that's the third disqualification case, but that also includes one cancellation case. Attorney Ted Te is better known as the voice of the Supreme Court. He served as the court spokesman from 2013 to 2018. He is the NCR coordinator of the Free Legal Assistance Group, or FLAG. He has also served as counsel for petitioners in one of the, I think, in the cancellation case. Attorney Emil Marañon III is one of the few who specialize in election law. He served with possibly the most famous of the election lawyers in our history, the late Sixto Brillantes, who was Comelec chair. We are privileged to have both of them join us tonight to explain the latest decision and also what it bodes for the elections. Attorney Te, Attorney Marañon, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hi, John. Thank you for the invitation to join you.
Good evening po sa inyo lahat.
Evening.
Thank you. So my first question for Ted and then for Emil, were you surprised by today's decision?
No. Well, I haven't read the entire decision. I've read parts of it, those that were posted on social media, because, well, I'm not part of the disqualification case that was filed. But I'm not surprised at the result. Although I am surprised at the timing that it took them that long to decide this particular disqualification case.
Attorney Emil?
In my case, I'm not totally surprised at all because unang-una, number one, si Commissioner Inting has already made her opinion regarding this issue before, at saka same case with Commissioner Ferolino. So I'm pretty sure that pareho lang din yung sasabihin nila as sa issue na to, katulad nung sa past decisions na nilabas na nila sa ibang cases involving similar issues.
So there are, in fact, I think 3 other related cases that have been decided on the division level and are pending review in the NBank. And I think the new chair has promised that the decisions on these cases, and I assume this fourth one also will be included, will be out in April. Um, I know it's hard to make predictions, especially about the future, but can I also ask the two of you, how do you see this going forward? We only have 19 days to election day. Do you see even the decisions coming out afterwards, and then maybe even the Supreme Court coming in well after the elections have been concluded? Attorney Ted?
Well, Emil is the expert on this, no. But my thinking is, these cases would eventually be headed to the Supreme Court. In any event, whoever wins at the or loses at the Comelec level, these issues are going to be elevated to the Supreme Court, and I think it would be a good idea to have them elevated so that the court can decide on issues such as, for example, the cancellation of the certificate of candidacy. As to whether these cases would eventually survive the elections, meaning depending on when the Comelec will get around to handing down these resolutions on the appeals or the motions for reconsideration. I think once Congress gets into the picture by, for example, proclaiming the winning candidate for president or vice president, I think some of these petitions might become moot, and the Comelec might not even resolve them anymore.
I see. Attorney Emil?
Well, una-una, we have to clarify that under Republic Act 6646, merong residual jurisdiction ng Comelec on disqualification cases and on petitions to deny due course. Residual jurisdiction meaning that even after proclamation, which supposedly under our legal system, supposedly nalilipat na yung jurisdiction from the Comelec to the PET or to the Presidential Electoral Tribunal through a co-warranto case. So nalilipat na supposedly yan. But under Republic Act 6646, pwede pang ituloy ng Comelec yung disqualification ng yung hearing or yung pag-decide doon sa disqualification case or doon sa denied due course petition. Even ang NBank can even order yung pag-suspend ng proclamation the moment na mag-move yung party na gawin yon. So it can be done actually under Republic Act 6646. But yung question mo, anong iniisip ko as regards to the ending of this case, there are 7 members of the Comelec and Bank, and titingnan natin, 4 commissioners have already rendered their opinion regarding this case. So that's Commissioners Inting, Ferolino, Nery, and Casquejo. So ibig sabihin yan, kung titingnan mo numbers, yung numero, mukhang malabo ng ma-reverse or mabaliktad yung decision nila as regards the Marcos case, unless one of yung isa dito siguro sa nag-decide previously papalit na position, which usually hindi naman nangyayari.
Thank you. Attorney Emil, is it fair to characterize the entire Comelec just from this series of cases, the disqualification and the one cancellation case? Many people, pass judgment on the Comelec and their competence, perceived competence to conduct the elections based on the rulings like this. As an election lawyer, as someone who served there before, do you think is it fair for a citizen to characterize the Comelec, to pass judgment on the Comelec based on decisions like this?
Hindi naman. So this is a purely legal question, no? So iba naman yung question of whether or not capable sila to run the elections. So it will entail another entirely different set of skills. So that involves project management. So project management not necessarily legal yan. So but at the end of the day kasi elections is a matter of public trust. So kung whether nagtitiwala ba yung tao sa Comelec and in turn sa election system, because it is Comelec that runs the automated election system. So matter of perception yan. So siguro ang question lang is whether na-convince ba yung tao na the decision was rendered fairly, without partiality. So yun yung question siguro. So I think hindi ko masasagot yan in behalf of the people, but I think siguro if you read the decisions, they also actually offered legal issues na pwedeng, in other words, debatable. Hindi naman siya entirely na wala talagang legal basis. That is why, ang sinasabi ko lang dito parate, dapat nito sa cases na to, they should have been decided months ago para nakaakyat na agad sa Korte Suprema. So tama naman si Sir Ted na ang tanong is bakit ngayon lang? Because kung titingnan ninyo, ang mga issues na to actually pare-pareho lang to sa dating issue na na-decide na. So bakit ngayon lang or bakit ang bagal ng response ng Comelec dito? Especially considering the fact that these cases are of transcendental importance kasi nga presidente yung pinag-uusapan natin dito and question ko whether eligible siya or hindi. So dapat inuna to over all other cases na na-decide ng Comelec.
Thank you, Attorney Emil. That was going to be my follow-up question to you. That point about timing that Attorney Ted raised. So people are criticizing it, this decision and the previous decisions for being so delayed. My question is the fact of the delay an indication of what you call project management? I mean, sure, they were dealing with legal questions, and yes, they were undermanned for a long time, but this doesn't exactly raise our confidence in their ability to conduct. So I'm trying to link these two things. I know you're very careful to say, these are legal questions, and then there's the project management side of it. But the delay, that doesn't seem like strictly like a legal issue. Can I have your thoughts on that?
Okay, una-una siguro we have to understand that this is not the only case na dinidecide ng Comelec. There are hundreds of cases. But yung question lang dito is whether or not dapat ba decide to na mas maaga because it involves the position of the presidency, which is the most important and the highest elective position in the country. Usually, depende yan sa approaches na ng different composition ng NBank. In the past, siguro, for example, in the 2016 elections, inuna talaga ng Comelec NBank at during the time, yung kaso ni Grace po. So that yung para fair na rin siguro sa party sa makaakyat agad ito sa Supreme Court. Because people will have to understand na hindi actually naman ito yung hindi naman Comelec yung may final say regardless of whatever yung resulta sa Comelec, alam naman natin na aakyat ito sa Supreme Court. So dapat naman sana, binigyan naman sana ng pagkakataon yung Supreme Court na ma-decide to agad-agad. But kung titingnan ninyo, around 20 days na lang mag-i-election na, yet ngayon lang lumalabas. And of course, another question dito is nga, in terms of paano hinawakan yung kaso, kung titingnan mo nga, bakit hindi kinonsolidate yung kaso na to in the first place? Kasi pare-parehong issue, bakit nagkaroon ng tatlong desisyon? Of course, we have to consider na denied due course yung isa, yung dalawa, disqualification. Bakit sineperate pa? Bakit hindi na lang na-consolidate, di ba? So, hindi ko din maintindihan yung part na yon. But then again, as you said, even yung quasi-judicial function ng Comelec, may project management component din yan na kung paano nyo hahawakan yung kaso, paano nyo di-decide na mas maaga, or yung triage din, ano ang kaso na mas importante over the other. For example, alam natin sa Comelec, pag nuisance cases yan, nauuna yan na-decidean kumpara sa other types of cases. Yung para matanggal agad sa balota yung mga nuisance. So question, mas importante ba yung Office of the President as regards other positions? In fact nga, of all of the many cases that I'm handling, ang dami pa talagang hindi na de-decidean. Not only sa division level, but even sa NBank level.
Attorney Ted, you haven't read the entire decision. I haven't read it myself either, but you've read parts of it. Can I ask you, what do you think of the decision?
Well, I think binanggit na rin ni Emil, it actually tracks very closely yung previous decisions in the disqualification cases, no? And so I also have the same sentiment, no? Bakit hindi na lang kinonsolidate? Dahil maaga pa naman alam na nila na kasama ito sa disqualification, so that iisa yung lalabas, no? The parts that I read would actually track very closely the previous disqualification case decision, which is, if I understand correctly, is on motion for reconsideration or appeal with the en banc. No, so even in terms of we're talking about managing the cases, it would have been more efficient, no, and less disruptive in the sense that it could have caused conflicts in decisions, no, to have consolidated all the disqualification cases so that kung halimbawa iisa yung decision, no, maaring iisa lang tapos mas mabilis yung pag-decide din pagdating sa en banc, pagdating sa motion for reconsideration or appeal, no, so that again makaakyat na uli ng Korte Suprema.
This is a little outside of the specific scope of work that you do as lawyers, but of course you're also involved or exposed to politics. I'd like to get a sense of what you think, how you think this set of cases, disqualification and cancellation cases, impact or affect the elections. Do they in fact have an impact? Maybe Attorney Ted first and then Attorney Emil.
Sige, I do think they have an impact, John, because in the sense that very early on, at least in the cancellation petition that we filed, no, we had asked very early on for them to resolve it very quickly according to the rules of the Comelec, which prescribe specific timelines, no, and we had repeatedly mentioned in our pleadings that it is important that the Comelec resolve the issue before the official ballot is printed. Kasi like Emil pointed out kanina, what is at stake is someone who is aspiring for the presidency, no less. And so it does have an effect in the sense that here's one candidate who has several petitions for disqualification and one petition for cancellation, but he's now included in the ballot. No, so while that may not directly have an impact of maybe saying iboto nyo to, pero may dating yun na parang okay, dahil hindi ka agad dinicide yung kaso, naisama talaga yung pangalan niya sa balota, no? Whereas halimbawa kung sinunod naman talaga yung timeline, no, within the timeline of the Comelec's own rules, no, posibleng abutan nila yung deadline for printing of ballots on this issue, no? And so yes, while it is not directly, I think, no, there's no direct connection. There is some connection, I think.
Thank you, Attorney Emil.
In my case siguro, no, unang question is whether or not may epekto siya sa eleksyon. Siguro we have to contextualize this, that this is just one of the many issues thrown against Bongbong Marcos. So siguro kung titingnan natin scale ng gaano kaimportante yung issue na to as regards other issues, for example, yung martial law abuses, for example, na involve yung tatay niya, and Bongbong Marcos has yet to admit and I think apologize for if needed. But I think yung mas importanteng question dito is whether or not this should be an issue that every electorate or every voter should take into consideration in voting or choosing someone to become president 2022 onwards. For me, the answer is of course yes. Every thinking Filipino should actually consider this issue in choosing their president, because of course this is the issue of eligibility. It involves the question of whether Mr. Marcos, who has been convicted for failing to file his tax return, eligible ba siya, or even the question na dapat na elect siya as president of this country. It should be an election issue na dapat pag-usapan ng lahat.
I'm glad you brought that up and drew the context, the larger context. In the first segment, I was struck by what our resource person J. Bautista of Kantar Media revealed that the Marcos campaign spent only about ₱1 million on digital advertising. And he's working on the assumption that that's because they don't need to spend on digital ads because they've spent years building this digital infrastructure of their own. And really, that's part of this whole context. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. There are many other issues related to this controversial campaign for the presidency. Attorney Ted, not to put you on the spot, but I wanted to go back to the question of the timetable. Let's say that the Comelec and Bank comes out with a decision on these cases on Friday next week, April 29.
Mhm.
And assuming that petitioners or the Comelec will raise this to the Supreme Court, when is the earliest time that the Supreme Court can take cognizance of these cases?
It depends, John, on one, what the reliefs are being sought, no, before the Supreme
Mhm.
Court. Kasi for example, kung may hinihingi na TRO, well, immediately titingnan ng korte kung may basihan to grant a TRO or similar reliefs, for example, no. So it might they might, no, considering the urgency of the relief and the context, no, na malapit ng eleksyon at mukhang crucial na i-determine kung pwedeng matuloy o hindi matuloy yung pagkandidatura ng isang kandidato, no? Posibleng sabihin nila, pag-aralan natin kung mag-issue ng TRO. Ngayon, the procedure really is that once a petition is filed, it is raffled. There is a regular schedule for raffle. Then it lands with the justice who is called the member in charge, and that justice is the one who determines preliminarily how the petition should go, no. Posibleng doon pa lang sasabihin na niya, ay walang basehan to, dismiss kagad. That's theoretically possible. But given the nature of this particular petition, for example, raising an issue that is directly connected to an election that is a few days away, that's not likely to happen. So most likely what the court will do, the member in charge is to recommend immediately that sagutin kaagad ng respondents, no. Give a period of time, typically that is 15 days. But again, considering the urgency, the court may actually shorten the period, no. And then immediately, if the court feels it is important enough, the court may even call for oral arguments. They did it in the Grace Poe petition, but again, the Grace Poe petition came earlier. Hindi nagmamadali before the election. So it's possible kung masyado na malapit sa election, posibleng magtawag ng oral argument in court. So again, it depends on the reliefs that are prayed for, but those are some of the things that the court can do.
Thank you. Attorney Emil, there have been rumors and rumblings about possible or in the process of happening election anomalies, no? And the striking thing is that they're coming from all sides. Senator Amy Marcos has raised the possibility of cheating or some large-scale fraud. Overseas, there have been a few, I think that at least 3 instances that I know of that overseas voters were given spoiled ballots and so on. How, as to someone who's observing this, it's like there is an active attempt to undermine the credibility of the Comelec, and it doesn't help that the Comelec sometimes has helped shoot itself in the foot. I'd like to ask you, Attorney Emil, how do you read this? Paano ba natin dapat ito intindihin?
Okay. For me, ang unang-una natin titingnan, no, saan nanggagaling ang ingay? Okay? So, unang-una, for example, of course, Amy Marcos has been very consistent in its position na ayaw niya ng automated election system.
That's right.
So even before the 2016 election, even before the 2022 elections, even 2019 elections, very consistent siya sa position niya na ayaw niya ng automated election system. So I think she's just being consistent with their position, and in fact, I think that the records of the Senate would show na pinupush na actually actively and even aggressively yung hybrid system na sinasabi, which is technically a manual system of counting, which for me is very dangerous because as an election lawyer who has been observing the process since the 2010 automated election system, there's no safer system than the automated election system. I think every employee of the Comelec would agree, every teacher that has been serving the election would agree, and every election lawyer who actually knows his stuff would agree that the automated election system is much, much, much safer than the manual election. Hindi ako kakabahan pag automated election system. So ang tanong ngayon is, bakit at this late stage ng election preparation natin, bakit may ingay na nanggagaling sa Marcos side? Are they laying like the foundation for something? Is there a push na magbumalik tayo sa manual election at this late stage of the preparation? So in a way, nakakatakot na may ganitong ingay, but at the end of the day, kailangan natin bantayan ito. And also, of course, meron ding sumasabay na balita, for example, na merong mga issues regarding Smartmatic breaches. And even, for example, the Solicitor General last week filed a case to the Supreme Court, also questioning the automated election system. And of course, we all know that OSG Calida is closely tied with the Marcoses. I think he's very open with his ties with the Marcoses. He has been openly supporting the Marcoses. So ang tanong, bakit may ingay galing kay Calida who is associated with Mr. Marcos? Bakit may ingay galing kay Amy Marcos? So ano ang pinupush ng mga Marcoses as regards the 2022 elections? Are they pushing na bumalik tayo sa manual? Ang question ko dito, if they are so confident that they are actually leading the surveys and they're actually already claiming a premature victory at this point, bakit gusto mo mag-manual kung ikaw yung mananalo? Or may alam ba silang numero na hindi natin alam? Or are they anticipating an eventuality na hindi natin alam? So these are questions na kailangan po natin sagutin given all of these rumors and tremors na nararamdaman natin po ngayon.
Thank you, Attorney Emil. I have more questions, but we've run out of time. This deserves a longer show, but Attorney Ted Te, Attorney Emil Marañon III, thank you very much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, John.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat. Good evening po.
Good evening.
That's it for us tonight. Join us again next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Follow us closely on the campaign trail because it isn't just elections as usual. This is John Nery. Good night.